After I retired, I finally bought my dream house right in front of the ocean. Then my son called. "My wife's family is moving there. Don't you like it? Then leave." I didn't say anything. But when they arrived, my surprise was waiting, one that they are never going to forget. It took me 67 years to understand that paradise isn't inherited. It is built with cracked hands and a bent back. And when I finally had the keys to my beachfront house in Florida between my fingers, when I felt the weight of the metal warmed by the afternoon sun, I thought I had reached the end of the road. How wrong I was. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how my own son tried to snatch away the only thing I built without his help. 40 years, do you hear me? 40 years cleaning other people's floors to be able to pay for my own. 40 years scrubbing bathrooms that smelled of cheap chemicals while my knees creaked like old wood. 40 years hemming uniforms until 3 a.m, with my eyes burning and my fingers bleeding because needles do not forgive fatigue. And on weekends, selling homemade pies at the farmer's market downtown, with the sun burning the back of my neck and people haggling over $5. All of that, all that accumulated pain like invisible scars, was for Mason, my only son. The boy I raised alone since he was 4 years old, when Arthur, my husband, died in that accident at the construction site. A concrete block that wasn't secured properly. 3 seconds that left me a widow at 45 years old, without a pension, without savings, just with a boy who asked every night when Daddy would come back. I lied to him for months. I told him Daddy was working far away, building houses for other families. Until one afternoon he looked at me with those brown eyes he inherited from Arthur and said, "Mom, I know Daddy went to heaven, but you aren't going to go, right?" I hugged him and cried until I ran out of tears. That night I swore that Mason would never feel what it is like to be left with nothing. And I kept my promise. I worked like a beast of burden. I got up every morning at 4 o'clock. I prepared his lunchbox with the best food I could buy. I took him to school even if we had to walk 40 minutes in the rain. Then I ran to clean 3 houses before noon. I came back, helped him with his homework even though I barely understood the math they were teaching him. At night, when he slept, I took out my borrowed sewing machine and worked until my eyelids closed on their own. Mason studied. He graduated as a civil engineer. He got a job at a major firm. He married Victoria, a woman from a wealthy family who always looked at me as if I had dirt on my shoes. And I smiled because I thought my son had found the life I could never give him. But all that time, I kept saving. Dollar by dollar, dime by dime. I kept the money in a Danish cookie tin hidden behind the water heater because I never trusted banks. For 30 years that tin kept filling up. Sometimes only $10. Other times, when I had good luck, up to $500. And I dreamed of a small house with big windows where I could see the ocean that I only knew from photographs. When I turned 65 and finally retired from the last house where I worked, I counted the money, $350,000. My hands were trembling as I stacked the wrinkled bills, stained with grease, some even smelling of soap. It was my freedom counted in paper. I searched for months until I found it. A small 2-story cottage on the Gulf Coast of Florida, painted peach, with a wooden deck that led straight to the beach. It cost $400,000. I was short $50,000. It was then that Mason offered me help. "Mom, Victoria has some savings. We can lend you what you are missing. Interest-free, no rush. It is the least we can do after everything you did for me." I accepted. I signed papers that I barely read because I trusted my son. Because a mother always trusts. The day I arrived at my house, I cried like I hadn't cried since Arthur's funeral. I opened the windows, and the smell of salt entered like a blessing. I stood on the deck, barefoot on the warm wood, and watched the ocean stretch as far as my eyes could see. The seagulls screamed, celebrating my arrival. The sun was setting, dyeing everything orange and pink, and I thought, "Eleanor, you did it. You can finally rest." I unpacked slowly, like someone placing treasures. My hand-knitted quilt, the photos of Arthur and Mason in cheap but clean frames, my old radio that still tuned into the oldies stations. I hung the floral apron in the kitchen that one of the ladies I worked for gave me. I put the wooden rocking chair in the living room, the one I bought at a flea market, and fixed myself with glue and nails. For 3 days, I lived in paradise. I woke up with the sun, drank coffee on the deck, walked along the beach collecting shells. In the afternoons, I read romance novels I bought used and cooked whatever I craved without having to rush. At night, I listened to the murmur of the waves and fell asleep without an alarm clock. But on the fourth day, the phone rang. It was Mason. His voice sounded different, cold, as if he were talking to an employee, not his mother. And the words that came out of his mouth destroyed my paradise in less than 2 minutes. But that part still hurts me so much that I need to breathe before telling you. If you want to know what my son said to me that day, what words can break the heart of a mother who gave everything, stay with me. Because what comes next is only the beginning of a nightmare I never imagined living in my own house. And I promise you something. This story does not end with a defeated mother. It ends with a lesson that neither my son nor his family will ever forget. If this story is touching your soul, subscribe to the channel to continue hearing real confessions from women who refuse to stay silent. Because here, mothers also learn to roar. Mom, I need you to listen without interrupting. Those were Mason's first words. Not a, how are you? Not a, have you settled into the house? Just an order disguised as a request. And I, as always, obeyed. I sat in the rocking chair with the phone pressed against my ear, feeling how the sea breeze that before seemed like a caress now felt like knives of ice. Victoria is going through a very difficult time. My son continued with that professional tone he used for his business meetings. Her social media business has her exhausted. The sponsorships, the recordings, the collaborations. She is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The doctor recommended she get away from the city, look for a quiet place to recover. He paused. I waited, feeling my stomach tighten. And well, we thought your house would be perfect. It is big, it is right on the ocean. It has that therapeutic air that Victoria needs. She is going to go with her mother Catherine and her sisters Chloe and Zoe, just for a few months. Mom, so she can recover. The words came out of my mouth before I could process them. But son, I just moved in. This is my house, my space to rest after a lifetime of working. Besides, it only has 3 bedrooms and, Mom, his voice hardened like cement. I am not asking for permission. I am informing you. Victoria needs that space, and you have plenty of rooms. Catherine can stay in the master bedroom. She is older and needs comfort. Chloe and Zoe can share the 2nd bedroom. Victoria stays in the 3rd. And you. I remained waiting, the silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. You can use the utility room downstairs. It is small but sufficient. After all, you don't need much. I felt as if they had held my head underwater. My lungs sought air that did not arrive. The utility room? In my own house. Mom, don't be dramatic. It is temporary. Besides, his voice lowered, but every word reached me clear as a sentence. Who do you think lent you those $50,000 you were missing to buy the house? Victoria, from her own savings. Savings she earned with her work, with her effort. So, technically, she has a certain right to that property. Or did you think it was free money? The world tilted beneath my feet. But, son, you said it was a loan without interest, without pressure. And it is, but it is also a favor that deserves reciprocity. Victoria helped you when you needed it. Now she needs help. It is only fair, don't you think? I tried to speak, but my throat was closed. I tried to find arguments, but my head was spinning. In 40 years, raising this man alone, he had never spoken to me like that. He had never treated me like a nuisance, like an old piece of furniture that can be moved from one place to another according to convenience. Mom, are you there? Yes, I whispered. Good. They arrive on Saturday afternoon. Victoria already rented a van to bring some things. Make sure the rooms are clean and ready. And, please, no drama. This is already decided. But, Mason, Mom, I have another call. We will talk later. He hung up. I stayed there sitting, with the phone dead in my hand, looking at the ocean that now seemed to mock me. The waves kept breaking on the shore, indifferent to my pain. The sun kept shining as if nothing had changed. But inside me something had broken, something I didn't know if could be repaired. $50,000 from Victoria? Her money? Her effort? The woman I met at my son's wedding carried a purse that cost more than 6 months of my salary cleaning houses. The woman who never worked a day in a factory, who never felt the pain of hands cracked by bleach, who never knew real hunger. That woman had helped me with her savings? Something didn't add up, but my head was too stunned to think clearly. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed on the deck watching the stars, hugging myself, feeling the cold of the early morning soaking into my bones. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel rage. Not sadness, not resignation. Pure, burning rage that burned my chest like a hot coal. I got up at dawn with swollen eyes and a decision made. I wasn't going to fight. Not yet. Because something in my son's tone, something in the confidence with which he claimed rights over my house, told me there was more, much more that I didn't know, and I needed to discover it before it was too late. I went to my small storage shed, where I kept the boxes with old documents, yellowed papers, pay stubs, photographs, and among all that mess of memories, I looked for something specific, something I had put away without much attention 2 years ago, but that now, suddenly, felt important. The manila envelope with the loan documents. My hands trembled as I opened it. I read every word, every clause, every small letter I had signed without reading, because I trusted my son. And there it was. Victoria's signature as the lender. The amount, $50,000. The date, April of 2023. But there was something else. Another paper, folded inside the envelope. A copy of a document I didn't remember seeing before. I unfolded it carefully, like someone opening a letter bomb. And what I read there froze my blood more than any phone call, because that paper revealed a truth my son had hidden for 2 years. A truth about money that should never have been Victoria's. A truth that changed absolutely everything. But before telling you what that document said, you need to understand something. In that moment, I decided that if they were going to play dirty, I would learn the rules. And when a mother who lost everything decides to defend herself, there is no force more dangerous in this world. What secret did that paper hold? What lie had my son built? Stay, because what comes next is going to make you understand why my blood boiled in a way I had never felt before. The paper trembled in my hands. Not because of the wind coming through the shed window, but because my fingers couldn't stay still. What I had in front of my eyes was a photocopy of a check. A huge, certified check issued by an insurance company called Pacific Family Protection. Amount, $300,000. Beneficiary, Mason Arthur Davis. Concept, life insurance, policy of Arthur Davis. Date, March of 2023. My breath cut short. I read once, twice, 3 times. The numbers didn't change. The letters didn't move. This was real. My husband Arthur, who died more than 20 years ago in that damn construction accident, had left a life insurance policy, an insurance policy I never knew existed, that no one ever mentioned to me. That disappeared into the silence while I scrubbed floors and sewed clothes until my fingers bled to support my son. $300,000. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the shed because my legs stopped holding me up. The photocopy fell into my lap, and I simply stayed looking at the cracked wall, trying to process what this meant. I remembered that terrible day when Arthur died. I was 45 years old. Mason was barely in 4th grade. My husband's body arrived at the hospital already lifeless, crushed by that concrete block that fell from a poorly operated crane. The construction company sent a legal representative who made me sign papers while my eyes were still swollen from crying. They told me there was no compensation because Arthur was working informally that day, that legally there was no labor link that generated responsibilities. Lies. It was all lies. But I was an ignorant woman, scared, having just lost her husband, with a child to feed and no idea how insurance or laws worked. I signed what they put in front of me and went home with empty hands and a shattered heart. What I didn't know then, what I discovered reading the back of that photocopy where there were notes in lawyers' handwriting, was that Arthur did have insurance. A private insurance policy he had taken out years ago when he was working steadily at another company. The policy was never canceled, and when he died, the money should have been released to his beneficiaries. I was the primary beneficiary. Mason, being barely 9 years old at that time, was registered as a secondary beneficiary. But according to the notes on that paper, someone, and I didn't need to be a detective to know who, had presented documents alleging that I had renounced the rights to the insurance, that I, supposedly, had signed a transfer of rights in favor of my minor son, trusting that he would use that money for his education and well-being. That signature that appeared scanned in a corner of the document, was not mine. It looked like it. The strokes tried to imitate my way of writing, but I know my own signature. I have repeated it thousands of times on receipts, on work contracts, on school papers, and that one that was there, with my full name, Eleanor Grace Davis, did not come from my hand. Someone had forged my signature, and Mason, at barely 22 years old, when he finally collected the insurance, had kept $300,000, which were legally mine. I got up from the floor feeling like every bone in my body weighed like lead. I walked toward the house like an automaton, with the paper clenched against my chest. I went into the kitchen, put water to boil for tea. I wasn't going to drink, and sat at the table where I had eaten alone for 3 days, believing I was finally resting. $300,000. With that money, I wouldn't have had to work until I was 65. I wouldn't have destroyed my knees going up and down stairs with buckets of water. I wouldn't have developed premature cataracts from sewing with so little light to save electricity. I wouldn't have lived on beans and tortillas for years while Mason studied at a private university, paid for with my money now. I understood eating at restaurants and wearing designer clothes, and the $50,000 Victoria lent me. Now everything made sense. It wasn't her money, it was my money. Money that Mason was returning to me in drops, making me believe it was a favor, that I owed him gratitude, that he and his wife were my generous saviors. He stole from me. My own son stole from me for more than 20 years. And now he was coming to take away the only thing I had managed to buy with my own hands. The water boiled and overflowed on the stove. The whistling snapped me out of the trance. I turned off the fire and stood there, watching the steam rise like ghosts, feeling something new grow inside me. It wasn't just rage. It was something colder, more calculated, more dangerous. It was determination. I took my old cell phone, one of those with big buttons for seniors, and dialed the only number I knew could help me. The number of Margaret, my second cousin who worked as a paralegal at a law firm in Chicago. She had always told me, "Eleanor, if you ever need legal help, I know good people." That day had arrived. Margaret answered on the third ring. "Eleanor? What a miracle, cousin. How are you?" "Margaret." My voice came out firmer than I expected. "I need a lawyer. A good one. One of those who doesn't get intimidated." There was a silence on the other end. Then, what happened? I was robbed, and the thief is on his way to keep robbing me. "Tell me everything." And I told her, every word, every detail, every paper I had in front of me. Margaret listened without interrupting. And when I finished, her voice sounded different. It sounded like tempered steel. "Cousin, this is fraud, forgery of documents, illicit appropriation of insurance funds. This is not just civilly actionable, it is a felony. Are you sure you want to open this box?" I looked out the window toward the ocean that had cost me 40 years of pain to reach. The ocean my son wanted to snatch from me as if I were nothing more than an obstacle, I am sure. Good. I'm reaching out to Mrs. Patterson. She is the best attorney specializing in family fraud I know, and she just semi-retired to Florida. Believe me, Eleanor, when she finishes a case, no stone is left unturned. I hung up and stared at that document one last time before putting it in a safe place, because now I understood something. My son hadn't called me to inform me. He had called to subdue me, to remind me that I owed him everything, to make me feel that without him, without his generosity, I was nothing. But he was wrong, because a mother who raised you alone, who gave you every dollar earned with blood and sweat, who sacrificed her own life so you could have a better one, that mother can also learn to defend herself when pushed against the wall. And on Saturday, when Victoria and her family of perfumed vipers arrived, I would be ready, not with screams, not with begging, with something much more powerful, the truth and the law on my side. But before that day arrived, something else was going to happen. Something that would show me exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. And believe me, what I saw took away the last drop of doubt that I was doing the right thing. Saturday dawned cloudy. The gray sky over the ocean seemed to predict a storm. But it wasn't the weather that had my stomach churning. It was knowing that in a few hours my sanctuary of 3 days was going to become a battlefield. Margaret had connected me with Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a 72-year-old woman, thin as a reed, with hawk eyes behind thick-rimmed glasses and a way of speaking that left no room for doubt. She reviewed every document I had, took photos, made calls, and finally looked me straight in the eye. Mrs. Davis, your son committed a serious crime. I can initiate legal actions immediately, but that would alert everyone. What do you prefer, direct attack or silent strategy? Silent, I responded without hesitation. I want them to feel safe, to believe they can keep trampling on me. And when they are completely confident, that is where I want them. A thin smile appeared on the attorney's lips. I like how you think. Then this is what we are going to do. And she explained the plan, a plan that required patience, documentation, and above all, keeping my mouth shut while we gathered evidence. Mrs. Patterson would stay nearby, pretending to be my neighbor, just another retiree enjoying the beach. No one would suspect an old lady sunbathing in a straw hat. At 3 p.m, I heard the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. I peeked out the window and saw a black Suburban, shiny, one of those that cost $80,000. 4 women got out as if they were descending from a private jet. Victoria came out first, 32 years old, tall, thin as a runway model, with perfectly straightened light brown hair falling over a white linen top and beige palazzo pants. Giant sunglasses covered half her face. Even from my window, I could see the shine of her gold earrings. She carried a Louis Vuitton bag hanging from her arm as if it were a trophy. Behind her came Catherine, her mother, a 60-year-old woman who seemed to have fought every wrinkle on her face with expensive creams. Platinum blonde dyed hair, lips painted intense pink, dressed in a designer tracksuit that had probably never seen a gym. She had that permanent expression of someone smelling something unpleasant. Victoria's sisters, Chloe and Zoe, were younger versions of the same mold. Chloe, 28, wore a crop top showing her belly button and shorts so short they barely covered the necessary. Zoe, 25, wore a coral jumpsuit and heels that sank into the sand of the path with every step, and among all of them, jumping and barking, came a golden retriever with perfectly brushed fur and a collar with rhinestones shining in the sun. Even the dog looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe combined. I opened the door before they knocked. I kept my expression neutral, almost submissive, the role I needed to play. Mrs. Davis, said Victoria, without even taking off her glasses. She didn't greet me with a kiss. She didn't ask how I was. She just looked into the house like someone evaluating a rental property. We arrived a little earlier than planned. Traffic was better than expected. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They entered like a gust of perfumed wind. Expensive perfume, the kind that feels synthetic and cloying. The dog came in first, sniffing everything, leaving sandy paw prints on the floor I had mopped that morning. Prada, come here, called Victoria without much conviction. The dog ignored her and kept exploring. Catherine took off her own dark glasses and scanned the living room with an expression of deep disgust. She touched the back of my armchair, the one I had upholstered myself with fabric I bought at the market, and wrinkled her nose. Is this the main furniture? Her voice was shrill, annoying, like a fingernail scratching a blackboard. Vicky, honey, we are definitely going to need to bring ours. This looks like a pawn shop. I felt rage rising up my throat like bile, but I swallowed it. I smiled. It is what I could buy with my budget. Sure, Catherine said with fake compassion while she kept walking. Not all of us had the same opportunities in life, right? One has to settle for what one can. Chloe was already going up the stairs without asking. Mommy, come see the bedrooms. I need the one with better light for my TikTok videos. Zoe followed her, her heels hitting every step like hammers. The dog went up behind, barking excitedly. I stayed downstairs with Victoria and Catherine. Victoria finally took off her glasses and looked at me with those honey-colored eyes my son insisted were the most beautiful he had seen. To me, they just looked cold like a snake's. Mrs. Davis, Mason asked me to thank you for receiving us. I know this is sudden, but I really need this rest. She touched her temples with a dramatic gesture. The brands, the collaborations, the events, everything has me on the verge of collapse. My therapist says I need to disconnect or I'm going to end up hospitalized. Hospitalized. This woman, who had never worked a real day in her life, who made money posing with products on Instagram, who complained of stress while I spent 40 years destroying my body to survive. This woman was talking to me about a nervous breakdown. I hope you find the peace you need, I said with the sweetest voice I could fabricate. I hope so. She turned and started walking toward the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator without asking for permission. We are going to need to stock this with organic food. I only eat local farm products, nothing processed. She closed the door with disdain. And I suppose there is no cleaning service here, right? No. Well, we will have to make do then. She looked me up and down, measuring my utility. You were in domestic service all your life, right? So surely you won't mind helping us with the basic tasks. Cooking, washing, making the beds. Nothing out of this world. Every word was a nail burying itself in my dignity. But I just nodded. I will see what I can do. From upstairs came screams. This bedroom is mine. No, I saw it first. Mom, tell Zoe that this one has a better view. Catherine sighed exaggeratedly. I'm coming, my loves. She went up the stairs with heavy steps. They left me alone in my own kitchen. I looked out the window and saw that the moving truck was just arriving. 2 men started bringing down boxes, suitcases, furniture, a white leather sofa, modern metal lamps, huge abstract paintings, flat-screen televisions. They weren't coming for a few months. They were coming to stay. I spent the rest of the afternoon watching them transform my house. They moved my furniture to the shed as if it were trash. They hung their paintings over the walls where I had put Arthur's photos. They put their Egyptian cotton sheets on the beds where I had planned to sleep when I had guests. They filled the refrigerator with their imported yogurts, their green juices, their cheeses that cost $20 a slice, and I carried my few belongings to the utility room, a space of 10 by 10 feet at the back of the house, with a window that didn't close well, and from where I could hear every laugh, every cruel comment, every word reminding me that in my own house I was now less than a guest. I was the maid. That night, while they ate sushi they had ordered via DoorDash, sitting in my living room like queens on a borrowed throne, I ate cold beans in the utility room. Prada, the dog, scratched at my door, wanting to enter. From the other side, I heard Catherine shout, "Prada, come here! Don't mix with that old woman. You're going to catch fleas." I heard them laugh. I closed my eyes and clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. But I didn't cry, because in my back pocket I carried Mrs. Patterson's number, and in my mind, I was already starting to count every insult, every humiliation, every proof the attorney needed to bury them. And when the moment came, when I had everything documented, when the trap was perfectly set, there I was going to show them who Eleanor Grace Davis was. But what came next was worse, much worse, because these women didn't just want my house, they wanted to destroy every piece of dignity I had left. And believe me, they tried with all their might. The first days were like walking on broken glass, barefoot. Every morning I got up before dawn in that room that smelled of humidity. I dressed in the same old things, my worn cotton pants and my thrift store blouses, and tiptoed out so as not to wake anyone. I made coffee in my own kitchen, feeling like a thief. But it didn't take long before Catherine established her rules. It was Tuesday morning. I was preparing eggs with beans for my breakfast when she appeared in the kitchen in a pink satin robe that probably cost more than my first month's rent when I was widowed. She looked at me with narrowed eyes, evaluating me like someone discovering a cockroach in her house. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound polite. She didn't answer the greeting. She just opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of imported mineral water, and put it on the counter with a sharp thud. "Starting today, Mrs. Davis, I am going to ask you a favor." It wasn't a request. It was a disguised order. "The girls and I have breakfast at 9 o'clock sharp. Nothing heavy, please. Victoria drinks a green smoothie with spinach, ginger, pineapple, and plant protein. I prefer scrambled egg whites with avocado, whole wheat toast, no butter, only olive oil, and chopped fruit. Chloe wants Greek yogurt with homemade granola, the kind made with oats, almonds, and organic honey. And Zoe eats light, just papaya with lemon and Japanese green tea. I stood looking at her with the spatula in my hand, processing the list as if she had spoken to me in another language. Homemade granola? I asked. Yes, homemade. Surely you can look up the recipe on the internet. She looked me up and down. You worked in houses, right? I suppose you know how to cook everything. I know how to cook normal food. Beans, rice, stews, soups. Well, then you are going to have to learn healthy cooking. Catherine took her water and turned around. Before leaving the kitchen, she added, without turning back. Oh, and breakfast is served on the deck, with the table set nicely. Use tablecloths, cloth napkins, those things. We want to eat with an ocean view, not in this kitchen that smells of burnt oil. She left, leaving me with my half-cooked eggs and a rage rising up my chest like lava. But I obeyed, because it wasn't time yet. I searched for recipes on the old phone Margaret had lent me. I walked to the supermarket, which was 20 minutes away under the scorching sun. I spent $40 of my money on ingredients I had never bought in my life. Organic spinach, protein powder, artisanal honey, Hass avocados, almonds. I came back with heavy bags cutting off the circulation in my fingers, sweating as if I had run a marathon. On the deck, Victoria was recording a video for her social media, posing with a giant straw hat and a white bikini, speaking to her phone with a honeyed voice. And here I am, my loves, in my refuge of peace by the sea, disconnecting from all the chaos of the city to reconnect with my essence. Her refuge. My house had become her refuge in front of hundreds of thousands of followers who gave her likes and drooling comments. I felt like throwing the green smoothie over her perfect head. But I kept walking. I spent the whole morning in that kitchen that, according to Catherine, smelled bad, preparing that damn breakfast as if I were in a luxury restaurant. I blended, chopped, toasted, whisked. At 9 o'clock sharp, I had everything ready on the deck. Tablecloths I took from the bottom of my suitcase. Plates I had bought at a flea market but cleaned until they shone. Cloth napkins I embroidered myself years ago. The 4 of them arrived as if they were the owners of the universe. They sat down without thanking, without acknowledging the work, without even looking me in the eye. Catherine tasted the egg whites and wrinkled her nose. They are dry. I'm sorry. And the avocado isn't at its point. It is very ripe. Chloe stirred her yogurt listlessly. This granola doesn't taste like the one I buy at the health food store. It is my first time making it. It shows. Victoria didn't even taste the smoothie. She checked it with the straw, smelled it, and pushed it to the side. I think you put too much ginger. It's going to upset my stomach. Zoe was the only one eating in silence, but every so often she looked at her phone and laughed at something she saw on the screen, completely oblivious to everything. I stood there like a statue, waiting for I don't know what. A kind word? A thank you? Something acknowledging that I wasn't a service robot but a human being? Nothing came. You can clear the plates, said Catherine, waving her hand, like someone shooing a fly. The days passed like that. I cooked, cleaned, washed their clothes with my hands because they complained that the washing machine damaged delicate fabrics. I hung their silk sheets in the sun. I picked up Prada's hairs that the damn dog left all over the house. I mopped up their sandy footprints. I took out their trash bags full of expensive product wrappers, and they treated me like air, as if I existed only to serve them. But the worst, what truly broke something inside, came 2 weeks later. It was Friday night. Catherine announced during breakfast that she was going to invite some friends to dinner, that she wanted to impress them with the house, with the view, with the lifestyle they were leading. Prepare something elegant, she ordered me. Shrimp, fresh fish, gourmet salads, something that doesn't make us look bad. I spent my money again. Another $50 on shrimp, another chunk on fish, more on vegetables and dressings. I spent all afternoon cooking until my back hurt. I prepared shrimp ceviche, fish grilled with spices, salad with mustard and honey vinaigrette, rice with saffron I had never used in my life. At 8 o'clock, Catherine's friends arrived, 5 women her age, all with the same look of ladies with money, designer clothes, shiny jewelry, salon hairstyles. They arrived with bottles of wine that probably cost $100 each. I installed them on the deck with candles, soft music in the background that Victoria played from her Bluetooth speaker, and served dinner as if I were a waitress in a fine restaurant. "Oh, Kitty, what a delightful place!" exclaimed one of them, a woman with hair dyed intense red. "And this view, is it yours?" I waited for Catherine to clarify, to say, "No, it belongs to my son's mother-in-law," to have at least that basic decency. But no, "It's in the family," she responded with a twisted smile. Victoria needed a quiet place, and well, here we are, enjoying it. The women ate, drank, laughed, praised every dish as if they had paid for it in an expensive restaurant, and I kept serving, clearing plates, refilling glasses, until one of them, the redhead, really saw me, as if she just realized I existed. "Hey, Kitty, and who is she? Your housekeeper?" The silence that followed was like thunder before the storm. Catherine looked at me. Everyone looked at me. And in that moment, on my own deck, in front of the ocean I bought with 40 years of suffering, it was decided whether I remained a person or became an object. Catherine smiled with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She is Eleanor, Vicky's mother-in-law. She lives here, mooching off us." The words fell like stones. "Poor thing," said another of the women with cheap pity. "Doesn't she have her own home?" "No," intervened Victoria from her place at the head of my table. "She worked all her life but could never save enough. You know how it is. People who live day to day, without financial education. We took her in because she has a good heart." "Right, mother-in-law?" She locked eyes with me, expecting me to confirm her lie. My hands trembled holding the pitcher of water. My throat was so closed I could barely breathe. I felt how the eyes of all those women looked at me with that mixture of condescending compassion and relief, thinking, "Thank God I am not her." "It is very noble of you to help her," said the redhead. "Not many daughters-in-law would do that." "Well, we are family," responded Victoria with fake modesty, "and family supports each other, right?" The women toasted. To family, to generosity, to the beautiful house they believed was Victoria's. No one toasted to me. I retreated to the kitchen before they saw the tears. I locked myself in the utility room and let myself fall onto that thin mattress that made my bones ache every night. I buried my face in the pillow and cried with a pain coming from a place I didn't know existed. I didn't cry for the words. I cried because in that moment I understood that my son had sold me out, that he had handed over my dignity as currency to keep his wife happy, that he had allowed them to turn me into this, into a shadow, into a shame, into a charity case. But between the tears, while I listened to their laughter filtering through the broken window, something else grew inside me. A promise. A promise that this wasn't going to stay like this, that I was going to document every humiliation, every lie, every abuse. And when the perfect moment arrived, when I had everything I needed, I was going to teach them that women like me don't break, we get tempered, and what would come next would show them that they had underestimated the wrong woman. Because just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, I discovered that the true abyss was still waiting for me ahead. Saturday morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and my soul in pieces. But something had changed. I no longer felt just pain. I felt something more useful, more dangerous, clarity. I left the house before they woke up. I needed air, space, to think without hearing their voices. I walked along the beach barefoot, letting the waves wet my feet, feeling the cold sand between my toes. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky orange and pink. "Early riser or insomniac?" The voice startled me. I turned and saw a woman sitting under one of the beach umbrellas, white hair cut very short, skin tanned by the sun, thick glasses with tortoise frames. She wore beige linen pants and a white shirt with sleeves rolled up. Next to her was a steaming cup and an open book. It was Mrs. Patterson, the attorney, my undercover neighbor. I approached carefully, looking back to make sure no one had followed me. She made a discreet sign for me to sit. "You look terrible," she told me bluntly. "I feel worse." "Good. That means you are ready to fight." She took out her phone and showed me the screen. I have been documenting everything. The boxes they brought, their trips to the supermarket loaded with luxuries with your money while you buy the basics. Yesterday I recorded audio of that whole humiliating dinner from my balcony. I have everything, Eleanor. I felt something inside me straighten up. Is it enough? To start, yes, but we need more. We need proof that they plan to stay indefinitely or, even better, that they want to legally appropriate the property. She took off her glasses and looked me straight in the eye. Do you think your son and daughter-in-law are capable of that? I didn't have to think about it. Yes, then we have to provoke them. Make them feel so safe that they lower their guard completely. She leaned forward. I want you to keep acting submissive, obedient, broken. Let them believe they have already tamed you. Meanwhile, I am going to install hidden cameras in strategic places in the house. Cameras? Isn't that illegal? In your own house, recording people who are committing abuse and possible fraud, in common areas where there is no expectation of absolute privacy? No, it is legitimate evidence. She put her glasses back on. Trust me, I know what I do. I have been litigating cases of patrimonial violence and elder abuse for 30 years. I have seen everything, Eleanor, and believe me, this is just beginning. Mrs. Patterson took a small device out of her bag. It wasn't bigger than a shirt button. This can be hidden anywhere. A plant, a photo frame, the ceiling. It records high-definition audio and video for 12 continuous hours before needing a recharge. How many do you have? 6. Enough to cover the living room, kitchen, deck, and main hallways. She handed them to me in a small cloth bag. Today, in the afternoon, when they go out to the beach or wherever they go, you install them. I will be watching from my house in case they return earlier. I took the small bag, feeling its weight. So small, so insignificant in appearance. But I knew they were weapons. And what do we do about the life insurance? I asked. With the $300,000 they stole from me. Mrs. Patterson smiled in a way that made me understand why she was so good at her job. I already filed a preliminary report with the district attorney, but I haven't formalized it yet. First, I want your son to come here. I want him to see how they have turned his mother into a servant, that he himself participates in or tolerates the abuse. That aggravates everything legally. Abandonment of an elderly person, economic violence, family psychological violence. When the time comes to present the complete case, it won't be just civil fraud. It is going to be criminal, Eleanor, with the possibility of jail time. The word jail fell on me like cold water. But he is my son. He is a thief who forged your signature and stole a fortune. Mrs. Patterson's voice had no compassion, only sharp truth. He is a man who allows his wife to humiliate you in your own house. He is someone who decided you weren't worth respect. Do you want justice, or do you want to keep being a victim? The tears threatened to come out, but I held them back. I want justice. Then, let's give it to you. We stayed there, sitting while the sun finished rising. Mrs. Patterson explained every step of the plan. How to install the cameras without them being noticed. What phrases to look for in conversations that served as evidence of malicious intent. How to discreetly provoke situations where they revealed their true plans. And there is something else, said Mrs. Patterson when I was leaving. I need you to look for any document they have brought. Contracts, legal papers, anything that has your name or the name of the property. If they are planning something, it is going to be on paper. People always believe that fraud on paper is more legitimate. I returned to the house with the cameras hidden in my pants pocket and a knot in my stomach. In the kitchen, I found Victoria preparing one of her smoothies. She saw me enter and didn't even look up from her blender. Good morning, I said. That was all I got. Are you going out today? Now she did look at me, with those cold eyes my son adored. Why? Do you need the house to yourself? No. Just asking to know if I should prepare lunch or... We are going to a restaurant on the boardwalk, a place I found on Instagram. She poured her smoothie into a glass. We will probably return at night, so you can take advantage to clean the house well. Yesterday I noticed dust on the window frames. Of course. She left the kitchen without adding anything else. 2 hours later, I heard them getting ready, fighting over who would wear, what dress, what heels. Catherine shouted instructions about makeup. Chloe looked for her favorite earrings. Zoe couldn't find her bag. Finally, close to noon, they all went out perfumed and made up as if they were going to a runway. Prada also went with them, which I appreciated because the damn dog always barked at me. I waited 15 minutes, peeking out the window every 2 seconds. When I was sure they wouldn't return, I took out the cameras. I installed the first one in the living room, hidden inside a decorative plant they had brought themselves. It was barely noticeable among the fake leaves. The second went to the kitchen, stuck with special tape behind the microwave, pointing toward the counter where they always sat to gossip. The third on the deck, inside a decorative lantern hanging from the roof. The fourth in the upstairs hallway, camouflaged in the smoke detector. The fifth in the secondary sitting room where Catherine spent the afternoons watching her soap operas. And the sixth I saved. I had a feeling I would need it for something specific. Afterward, I started the search. I entered the master bedroom where Catherine slept, my bedroom, where I had planned to sleep. Now, it was full of her things, expensive creams, perfumes, clothes thrown over the chair I had upholstered myself. I opened drawers with trembling hands. I found credit card bills with huge debts, receipts for beauty treatments, but nothing legal. I went to Victoria's room, more orderly, more minimalist. Her laptop was on the desk, closed. I didn't dare touch it, but in her nightstand drawer, I found a folder. I opened it with my heart beating like a drum. Inside were documents, many documents, contracts for her influencer business, bank statements, and at the bottom, 3 stapled sheets that made me tremble. It was a deed of gift contract. A contract where I, supposedly, ceded ownership of this house in favor of Victoria Christine Belmont, in gratitude for her financial and emotional support during difficult times. The contract was dated for 2 weeks from now, and my signature was already there, forged, again. I took photos with the phone Margaret lent me. My hands were trembling so much that the first ones came out blurry. I breathed deep. I forced myself to calm down and took clear photos from all angles. I put everything back exactly as it was and got out of there before panic paralyzed me. I ran to Mrs. Patterson's house. I knocked on her door as if I were being chased. She opened, saw my face, and knew. "You found it. They are going to forge my signature again. They are going to steal the house." I showed her the photos. Mrs. Patterson reviewed every image with a serious expression. Then she looked up, and I saw something in her eyes that gave me hope. Perfect. This is exactly what we needed. She went to her computer and started typing fast. "I am going to contact a trusted notary public. We are going to certify these photos as evidence, and we are going to prepare a trap." "What kind of trap?" She turned to me with that thin smile again. "We are going to let them believe they won. We are going to make them think you signed voluntarily. And when they are celebrating, when they are absolutely sure that this house is already theirs," she left the phrase hanging in the air, and I finished it for her. "That is where we destroy them." But what I didn't know was that my son was about to appear, and what he was going to witness, what he was going to say, what he was going to choose, that would be the final test of whether there was still something left of the boy I raised, or if that man was already completely lost. Mason arrived on a Tuesday afternoon without warning. I heard his voice from the utility room, that cheerful tone he used when speaking with Victoria, so different from the ice with which he spoke to me. "Honey, I'm here. I brought the documents you asked for." I stood paralyzed on the mattress, where I was folding the clothes I had just washed. His clothes, his wife's clothes, his mother-in-law's silk sheets. Everything I cleaned as if I were the employee they believed I was. I breathed deep and left the room. I needed to see him. I needed to look him in the eye and look for even a spark of the son I raised. He was in the living room, hugging Victoria, dressed in his office suit I had taught him to iron when he was 17. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and his hair a little longer than usual, but his smile was wide as he kissed his wife. "Mom," he saw me, and the smile became smaller, more forced. "I didn't know you were here. I live here," I said with a voice firmer than I expected. "It is my house." An uncomfortable silence fell like thick fog. Victoria separated from Mason and looked at me with that expression I already knew well. Annoyance, barely disguised as tolerance. "Mrs. Davis, can you bring us something to drink? Mason comes from the city. He must be exhausted." It wasn't a question. It was an order. I looked at my son, waiting for him to say something. To say, "Mom, sit with us." To say, "No, Vicky, she isn't the maid." to say anything that showed he still saw me as his mother, but he just loosened his tie and let himself fall onto the sofa. My sofa, which was now covered with her expensive decorative pillows. A sparkling water would be fine, Mom, please, please. As if that word compensated for everything. I went to the kitchen with my legs trembling. I took out 2 bottles of mineral water from the expensive ones Victoria bought. I served them in glasses with ice and returned to the living room. I placed them on the coffee table without saying anything. Thanks, muttered Mason without looking at me. I stayed there, standing like a servant waiting for more orders, because I no longer knew what other role to play in my own house. Victoria took some papers out of her bag, the same ones I had photographed days ago. The donation contract, my supposed forged signature waiting to become reality. Honey, did you bring the notary stuff? Yes, all ready. Mr. Garza says we can sign on Friday. We just need your mother-in-law to go too, so everything is legal. My knees almost gave way. They were talking about this in front of me, as if I were a piece of furniture, as if I didn't understand English, as if I weren't the legitimate owner of this property. Excuse me. My voice came out higher than intended. What signature are you talking about? Mason finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes froze my blood. There was no guilt, no shame, only annoyance, as if I were a problem to solve. Mom, sit down. I prefer to stand. He sighed with that gesture of impatience he made when something annoyed him. Okay, Victoria and I have been talking. This house is very big for a single person. You are already older, you can't maintain it properly, and, frankly, after all the support Victoria gave you to buy it, it is fair that she has legal rights over the property. Every word was a knife. Legal rights, I repeated. I bought this house, with my money, with 40 years of work. With your money, and with the $50,000 my wife lent you. His voice rose in volume. Or did you already forget that convenient detail? That money wasn't hers. The words came out before I could stop them. It was mine, from your father's life insurance. The silence that followed was absolute. Mason stood up slowly, his face transformed into a mask of cold fury. What are you talking about? I took out my phone with trembling hands and showed him the photo of the document. The copy of the check, the $300,000 he collected forging my signature. I am talking about you robbing me, Mason, that you forged my name, that you kept your dead father's money, with the money that legally was mine, and that you let me work like a donkey for 20 more years while you lived like a king with my inheritance. His face went from red to white. Victoria stood up too, looking between the two of us like a spectator of an accident. You don't know what you're talking about, said Mason, but his voice trembled. That money I invested. I used it to study, to build my career, to rob me? My voice broke. To make me believe my whole life that we were poor when you had almost $500,000 tucked away? To let me clean other people's toilets while you ate in expensive restaurants? I did something productive with that money, he shouted. You would have kept it under the mattress like the ignorant woman you are. I turned it into a career, into a future. The word ignorant hit me harder than any slap. Ignorant? I whispered. Ignorant, the mother who raised you alone? Ignorant, the woman who killed herself working so you could have what I never had? Ignorant? Yes, his face was deformed by rage. Ignorant. You never understood anything about money, about investments, about how the world works. If I had given you that money, you would have wasted it. I used it better. I did something with my life. Something you built with my pain, I said, with tears falling now without control. With your mother's broken knees, with your mother's cracked hands, with your mother's bent back. Enough, Victoria interposed between us. This is ridiculous. Mrs. Davis, you are upset, confused. That money was more than 20 years ago. There is no way to prove it now. Yes, there is. I took out more photos. Copies of legal documents. The forged signature. Everything! Victoria paled. Mason snatched the phone from my hands and reviewed the images. His eyes moved fast, processing, calculating. And then he said something that destroyed me more than everything before. You know what, Mom? Yes, I did it. I forged your signature. I kept the money. And do you know why I don't regret it? Because that money gave me the life I deserved. A life far from your mediocrity, from your conformity, from your victim mentality. Dad would have wanted me to have opportunities. I just took what was mine. My world collapsed. Nothing was left. The boy I had raised, the baby I nursed, the teenager I helped with homework until falling asleep over the books. That boy was dead. And in his place, there was a stranger who hated me for having given him everything. Mason. My voice came out broken. I loved you more than my own life. Well, your love wasn't worth enough. He turned around. Vicky, pack your things. We are leaving this house. I am not going to keep arguing with an ungrateful old woman who doesn't recognize everything I did for her. Everything you did for me? The scream came from a deep, primitive place. Lending me my own stolen money? Allowing your wife to turn me into her servant? Letting me sleep in a utility room in my house? Is that what you did for me? I gave you a roof when you had nowhere to fall. This is my roof, my house, which I bought with money I lent you. He made quotation marks with his fingers, mocking, cruel. Money that technically you still owe me, right? So if you think about it properly, Mom, this house is as much mine as yours. Victoria was already going up the stairs. Catherine, girls, pack up, we're leaving. No, I said. You aren't going anywhere. Mason laughed, a dry laugh, without humor. Oh, no? And who is going to stop us? You? The law. He froze. I went to lawyers. I have everything documented. The insurance fraud, the forged signatures, the abuses, everything. And if you try to leave, if you try to disappear as if nothing had happened, the criminal complaint is filed tomorrow morning. You're lying. But his voice trembled. Do you want to find out? We stayed looking like that, mother and son, separated by an abyss that could never be crossed again. In his eyes I saw fear. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what I had felt. Catherine came down the stairs like a whirlwind. What is happening here? Mason? Why are you shouting? Her mother-in-law is threatening us, said Victoria with the voice of a perfect victim. She says she is going to sue us, that she is going to put us in jail. She is crazy. I am not crazy, I said, looking at them all. I am tired. Tired of being used. Tired of being robbed. Tired of being invisible in my own life. Mason took a step toward me. His face was a mixture of rage and something else. Something that, in another time, I would have confused with concern, but that now I recognized as simple fear of consequences. Mom, listen to me well. You have no proof of anything. Those old papers are worthless. And if you try to do something against us, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you were. A bitter, controlling mother who never wanted to let go of her son. The world can think what it wants, I said with a calm I didn't know I had. But the truth is only one. You robbed me. Your wife humiliated me. And I am not going to allow you to destroy me anymore. He turned to leave, but before going up the stairs, he stopped. Without turning back, he said, You were always a burden, Mom. Dad knew it. That's why he risked so much in those dangerous jobs, because he wanted to get away from you. The blow was perfect, designed to destroy me, and it almost succeeded. I stayed there, alone in the living room, while they went up to pack. I heard their muffled voices, their mutual accusations of who was to blame for everything. I let myself fall into a chair. The tears didn't come. There were none left. But in my pocket, the phone vibrated. A message from Mrs. Patterson. We recorded everything, every word, every confession. Now we have them. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled, because my son had just dug his own grave, and I was going to make sure he fell into it. But the war was just beginning. Because when cornered rats realize they lost, they become more dangerous than ever. And what they planned to do next, that almost cost me everything. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake in the utility room, listening to every sound, every whisper filtering through the thin walls. I heard Mason and Victoria arguing in low voices. I heard Catherine calling someone on the phone, using words like lawyer and rights. I heard suitcases being dragged across the floor upstairs. But I didn't go out. I didn't say anything. I stayed still, like a wounded animal that needs time to heal before getting up again. When dawn came, I left the room in my humblest clothes, the ones I used to clean houses decades ago. Worn denim jeans, cotton blouse with a bleach stain that never came out. I tied my hair in a tight ponytail. I looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. I looked exactly like what they believed I was, a defeated old woman. Perfect. In the kitchen, I found Catherine preparing coffee. She saw me and wrinkled her nose with that disdain that no longer hurt me, because there were worse things than the disdain of an empty woman. "Good morning," I said with a submissive voice. She didn't answer. She just kept stirring her coffee with exaggerated movements, as if my presence contaminated the air. I made my own coffee, simple, without sugar, because there was none left, and sat at the corner of the counter. Far away, small, invisible. "Mason is going to return on Friday with a lawyer," said Catherine suddenly, without looking at me. "A real lawyer, not those charlatans you surely consulted. And we are going to resolve this in a civilized manner." "Okay," I whispered. That surprised her. She turned to see me with narrowed eyes. "Okay? Just like that? What else can I say? You can start by apologizing for the horrible accusations you made against my son-in-law. Mason is a good man, a respected professional, and you accuse him of being a thief in front of his wife. That is unforgivable." I lowered my gaze to my cup. "You're right. I let myself be carried by emotion." Catherine approached closer, like a vulture smelling weakness. "I like that you recognize your mistake. Look, Eleanor, I am not a bad person, but you have to understand that this house is now part of the family. Victoria invested in you. She helped you when no one else would. The least you can do is be grateful." "I am." "Then are you going to sign the papers on Friday?" I raised my gaze slowly. I looked her straight in the eye with the most defeated expression I could fabricate. "If Mason says it is best, then I will do it." A satisfied smile crossed her painted face. "Good. This way we avoid ugly legal problems. Because, believe me, if this goes to court, you have nothing to fight with. We have expensive lawyers, contacts, influence. You have, what? A miserable pension?" I shrank, as if her words had hit me. And maybe they did, but no longer in the way she thought. Now every insult, every threat, every demonstration of her cruelty was evidence. Ammunition for when the moment came. She left the kitchen humming, believing she had won. As soon as she left, I took out my phone and wrote to Mrs. Patterson. "They are planning to bring a lawyer on Friday to force me to sign. They say they are going to resolve this civilly." The answer arrived in seconds. "Perfect. Let them come. But before that, we need more. Can you do something so they trust completely?" I thought fast. Yes, I know what to do. The rest of that week I transformed into what they wanted me to be. Submissive, obedient, broken. I prepared elaborate breakfasts without complaining. I washed their clothes with extreme care. I cleaned every corner of the house. I smiled when they insulted me. I bowed my head when they ignored me. And every night, after they fell asleep, I met with Mrs. Patterson at her house. We reviewed the recordings from the hidden cameras, and there was pure gold. On Wednesday night, Victoria and Catherine got drunk on wine. The cameras captured the whole conversation. "As soon as she signs, that old woman goes," Victoria said, slurring her words. "I don't care where. Let her go to a nursing home. Let her go with some relative. I don't care. But she isn't staying here ruining my paradise." "And if she refuses to leave after signing?" asked Catherine. "Well, we kick her out. Legally, she would no longer have rights to the house. We can call the police if necessary." "And Mason?" "Mason does what I say. He always has." They laughed. They toasted. They planned my expulsion like someone planning a vacation. On Thursday, while they went to the spa, I entered Victoria's room again. This time I searched on her laptop. It didn't have a password, because arrogant people always believe they are untouchable. I found emails, dozens of emails, with lawyers, with notaries, with real estate agents. In one, dated 3 weeks ago, Victoria wrote, "I need the transfer process to be fast. The current owner is an elderly lady, uneducated, easy to convince. Once she signs the donation, I want to put the property on sale immediately. The beachfront market is at its best. I can get at least $800,000. $800,000. My house, for which I worked 40 years, which I bought for $400,000, was now worth double, and she planned to sell it, keep everything, and leave me on the street. I took screenshots of everything. Every email, every message, every plan they had woven, believing I was too stupid to discover them. On Friday morning, I dressed in the best I had. A simple, wine-colored dress I had bought for Mason's wedding. Black flats, hair pulled back in a bun. I put on the silver earrings Arthur gave me on our 10th anniversary, the only ones I never sold in difficult times. I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman. Not defeated anymore, not victorious either, not yet, but prepared. In the kitchen, Victoria was eating her eternal papaya with lemon. She saw me enter and raised an eyebrow. "You dressed up?" Mason said a lawyer was coming. "I want to look presentable." She smiled condescendingly. "How cute." "Well, as long as you understand that this is just a formality, everything is already decided." "I understand." At 10 in the morning, Mason arrived. He came with a man of about 50, impeccable gray suit, leather briefcase. Mr. Garza, as he introduced him. Behind them, without anyone expecting it, entered Mrs. Patterson. She wore a beige suit, her own briefcase, and an expression of tempered steel. "Good morning," she said with a clear voice. "I am attorney Hortensia Patterson, legal representative of Mrs. Eleanor Davis. I understand there are documents to review." The silence that fell was delicious. Mason paled. "Mom, what is this?" "This," I said with a firm voice, "is that I also have rights, and if we are going to talk about papers, we are going to talk about all the papers." Victoria stood up like a spring. "This is ridiculous, Mrs. Davis. This is a private family meeting, a meeting where you plan to strip my client of her assets using forged documents," interrupted Mrs. Patterson. "I would say that merits legal representation, don't you think, Mr. Garza looked between everyone with evident discomfort. "Mason, you didn't tell me your mother would have an attorney, because I didn't know." Mason glared at me. "Mom, what do you think you are doing? Defending myself." Mrs. Patterson took a thick folder out of her briefcase and dropped it on the living room table with a dry thud. "Here I have. Copy of the check from Arthur Davis's life insurance for $300,000, fraudulently collected by Mason Davis, using a forged signature. Graphological analysis confirming the forgery. Testimonies from insurance company employees. Documentation of the $50,000 supposedly lent by Mrs. Victoria, which in reality comes from the stolen money. And as a bonus, she took out another thinner folder. Audio and video recordings from the last 2 weeks, documenting psychological abuse, appropriation of housing, and conspiracy to commit fraud through another donation contract with a forged signature." The world stopped. Catherine dropped her coffee cup. The liquid spilled on the wooden floor like dark blood. Victoria tried to speak, but no words came out. Mason just looked at me with a mixture of shock and something that could have been respect if it weren't tainted with so much hate. "This is illegal," he said finally. "Recording us without consent, on my client's private property, in common areas, with justified cause of suspicion of a crime, totally legal." Mrs. Patterson smiled, and now comes the interesting part. "You have 2 options." She approached Mason with the calm of a shark that already smelled blood. "Option 1. You abandon this house today. Mason returns the $300,000 he stole, with interest calculated over 20 years. That adds up to approximately $600,000. You sign a document renouncing any right to this property, and my client does not file criminal charges." "And option 2? asked Mr. Garza with a tense voice. "Option 2. We file criminal charges for fraud, document forgery, family violence, misappropriation, and conspiracy. With the evidence we have, Mason can face between 5 and 10 years in prison. Victoria as an accomplice, another 3. And, believe me, with your social media profiles and ostentatious lifestyle, you will be the media's favorite cases." The silence was so thick it could be cut. Mason let himself fall onto the armchair. He covered his face with his hands. And I, for the first time in weeks, breathed completely, because I had finally stopped being a victim. And now came the part I had waited for most. Seeing the masks fall and revealing the true faces when there was nowhere left to hide. Mr. Garza was the first to react. He closed his briefcase with a dry snap and stood up. "Mason, I am not signing my name on anything related to this. If there are accusations of fraud and document forgery, I cannot represent you. It would be complicity. He adjusted his tie. I recommend you get a criminal defense attorney. A good one. He left without saying goodbye, leaving the door open behind him. The sound of his car starting was like a sentence. Victoria exploded. This is a trap. You set a trap for us like a crawling snake. No, I said with a calm I didn't know I possessed. I only documented the truth. You dug your own hole all by yourselves. Mom, you can't do this to me. Mason stood up, eyes red and hands trembling. I am your son, your only son. Are you going to put me in jail? You robbed me, I responded. You forged my signature twice. You let me work like an animal for 20 more years when that money would have changed my life. You treated me like a nuisance. You allowed your wife to humiliate me in my own house. And now you ask me for mercy. I used that money to study, to become someone in life. With my money, without my permission. That is called theft, Mason, and you know it. Catherine approached Mrs. Patterson with a threatening expression. How much do you want? Everyone has a price. Name your amount and disappear that evidence. Mrs. Patterson looked at her like one looks at an insect. Ma'am, I am not for sale. But you really should worry. As an accomplice and cover-up, you can also face charges. The color disappeared from Catherine's face. Chloe and Zoe, who had been listening from the stairs, ran down. Mom, what is happening? Are we going to have problems? Shut up, hissed Catherine. Victoria walked from one side to another, like a caged lion. Suddenly she stopped and pointed her finger at me. You never loved Mason. You were always a castrating, controlling mother who couldn't let him go. That's why he had to take that money to free himself from you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A bitter, deep laugh, coming from a dark place where I had stored so much pain. I didn't love him. I gave him every dollar I earned, every minute of my life, every drop of my blood. The thing is, Victoria, you will never understand what true love is, because love is not possession, it is not manipulation, and certainly it is not theft. Enough, shouted Mason. Enough, Mom. What do you want? Money? An apology? What do I have to do for you to stop this? I want you to acknowledge what you did, in front of everyone, without excuses, without justifications. I want you to look at your wife and admit that you used stolen money to win her over, to impress her, to buy this life you have. Eleanor, don't be dramatic, began Victoria. Shut up. Mason's scream surprised us all. He turned to his wife with an expression I had never seen on him. Shut up, Victoria. For once in your life, shut up. Victoria recoiled as if she had been slapped. Mason turned to me. He had tears running down his cheeks. You're right. Everything you say is true. I forged your signature. I kept the money. I used every dollar to build a life I thought I deserved more than you. His voice broke, because I was ashamed. Mom, ashamed of being the son of the lady who cleaned houses, ashamed of wearing second-hand clothes, ashamed of carrying lunch boxes with beans when my classmates brought imported sandwiches. Mason, I whispered. No, let me finish. When I found that insurance, when I saw that amount of money, I thought it was my opportunity, my escape. I believed that if I had money, if I studied in good schools, if I dressed well, if I drove a good car, then I could forget where I came from. He wiped his tears with rage. But I never forgot. Every dollar I spent reminded me that I was taking it from you, and instead of regretting it, I hated you more, because your existence was my guilt walking. The silence was absolute. Even Victoria had been left speechless. And when Victoria appeared, continued Mason, when she accepted me believing I was someone important, someone with money, I clung to that lie. And you, Mom, were the truth I needed to hide. That's why I pushed you away. That's why I allowed them to treat you like that. Because if I admitted who you really were, I admitted who I was. He fell to his knees in front of me. Forgive me. I know I have no right to ask. I know I destroyed everything. But forgive me. I looked at him there, my son, broken into pieces by the weight of his own lies. And I felt nothing, or maybe too much. So much that it canceled itself out. I forgive you, I said finally. But that doesn't change the consequences. He raised his gaze with desperate eyes. Then, what is going to happen? Mrs. Patterson approached with her folder. Mrs. Davis and I have prepared an agreement. If you sign it today, now, without modifications, she will not file criminal charges. She took out several documents and put them on the table. First, Mason Davis commits to returning $600,000 to Eleanor Davis within a period no longer than 6 months. As collateral, he will place a lien on his condo in the city in favor of Mrs. Davis. Mason paled, but nodded. Second, Victoria Belmont, Catherine, Chloe, and Zoe will leave this property today, before 6 in the afternoon. They cannot return under any circumstances. Any belonging they leave will be donated to charity. That is abuse, screeched Catherine. Abuse? Mrs. Patterson raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, I have 3 hours of recording where you call my client a useless old woman, a nuisance, a parasite, and other terms equally charming. Do you want me to play them here, or do you prefer to pack in silence? Catherine closed her mouth. Third, a document will be signed before a notary where Mason Davis acknowledges the fraud committed and renounces any hereditary right over current and future properties of Eleanor Davis. That is cruel, murmured Victoria. You know what is cruel? I said, looking her straight in the eye. Planning to sell my house for $800,000 and leave me on the street. I have your emails, Victoria. All of them. Her face went through 10 emotions in 2 seconds. Horror, denial, rage, and, finally, acceptance of defeat. And if we don't sign? She asked with a small voice. Then Mrs. Patterson smiled without humor. We see you in court, and I assure you that what we offer today is going to seem generous compared to what a judge will decide. Mason took the pen. His hand trembled so much he could barely hold it. After this, will I be able to see you again? I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe someday, when you have learned to be the man your father would have wanted you to be. The honest, hard-working, dignified man. Not this one you built with lies. He signed every document, every waiver, every acceptance of guilt. Victoria signed with tears of rage. Catherine signed spitting insults under her breath. The sisters signed without understanding completely, but terrified of the consequences. At 5 in the afternoon, the house was empty. They left in the same black SUV they arrived in, but now loaded with silence and defeat. Prada barked from the window, probably the only one who didn't understand why they were fleeing. I watched them move away down the gravel road. I watched the SUV get smaller until it disappeared around the curve. And finally, after weeks that seemed like years, I was alone in my house. Mrs. Patterson put her hand on my shoulder. You did well. It doesn't feel like victory, because it isn't. It is justice, and justice is never sweet, only necessary. That night, Mrs. Patterson left too. I stayed on the deck watching the sunset. The waves broke softly against the shore. The seagulls flew in perfect formation. The sky painted itself violet and gold. I entered my house. I walked through every room, reclaiming it. I removed their expensive sheets and put mine on. I took down their abstract paintings and rehung the photos of Arthur and Mason when he was a boy. I moved their white furniture to the shed and brought out mine, the ones I had upholstered myself. In the kitchen, I made beans, simple, with onion and a little pepper. The smell filled every corner, and it was the smell of home, real home, not expensive perfumes and organic foods. I ate on the deck, alone, with the sound of the ocean as company. And for the first time in months, I slept in my own bed, in the master bedroom, with the windows open so the salty breeze could enter. I slept all night, without nightmares, without sudden awakenings, because finally my house had returned to being mine. But the story doesn't end with revenge. It ends with something much more powerful, with a woman who learned that sometimes loving someone also means letting them go, and with a lesson that the world needed to hear. 6 months later, a yellow envelope arrived in my mailbox. I recognized it immediately. It was from the bank. Inside was a transfer receipt for $600,000 deposited into my account. Mason had complied. There was no letter, no additional apology. Only the money he owed me, returned in silence like someone paying a debt that burns the hands. I sat on the deck with the paper between my fingers, watching the waves I already knew by heart. Every crest, every valley of the sea, and I asked myself if I felt something. Victory, perhaps, satisfaction. But what I felt was something stranger, liberation. Not for the money, although I am not going to lie, having that amount in the bank, after a lifetime of scarcity, was like breathing for the first time. It was liberation from something deeper. From the weight of carrying the son I wasn't able to raise correctly. From the guilt every mother feels when her son turns out broken. Because during those 6 months, I had a lot of time to think, to review every decision, every sacrifice, every moment I chose to give everything without teaching him the value of what he was receiving. Was I a good mother? Yes, in the sense that I fed him, clothed him, educated him, but I was also the mother who never said no, the mother who broke into pieces so he could have comforts, the mother who taught him, unintentionally, that he deserved everything and I deserved nothing. That was my part of the guilt, and I accepted it. With the money, I did several things. First, I repaired the house completely. I painted the walls a soft yellow, that color that traps the sunlight. I fixed the broken window in the utility room. I bought new furniture, not expensive, but comfortable and mine. I planted flowers in the garden, red bougainvilleas, jacarandas, sunflowers. Second, I donated a part. $50,000 went to a shelter for women victims of family violence in Florida. Another $50,000 for a literacy program for seniors, because I understood that my story wasn't unique. There were thousands of Eleanors in the world, cleaning other people's houses while dreaming of a corner of their own. Third, I saved the rest, because for the first time in my life I had a safety cushion. I no longer had to live day to day, praying the refrigerator wouldn't break or I wouldn't get sick. But the most important thing I did was something that didn't cost money. I started to live. I met my neighbors for real. Not just Mrs. Patterson, who became my best friend and confidant, but Mr. Stevens, the retired fisherman who lived 3 houses down, Mrs. Higgins, who sold homemade bread on Sundays, Marina, a 50-year-old woman who had just divorced and was learning to live alone for the first time. We formed a group. We gathered on Friday afternoons on my deck. They brought food, I provided the house and the ocean view. We talked about everything. About ungrateful children, difficult husbands, jobs that broke our bodies, dreams we never fulfilled, and some we could still reach. One of those afternoons, Mr. Stevens brought his son, Robert, a 60-year-old man, retired architect, widower for 5 years, tall, with abundant gray hair and hazel eyes that wrinkled when he smiled. We talked about houses, design, how to transform spaces. He offered to help me redesign my garden without charging me anything. Neighbors support each other, he said. He came the following Saturday with hand-drawn plans. He spread them on my kitchen table and explained every detail. Where to plant trees to provide shade, how to build a small fountain that would attract birds, where to put wooden benches to read. We worked together for weeks. He dug, I planted. He cut wood, I painted. And between shovel and shovel, between laugh and laugh, I learned something I thought I had forgotten. How to enjoy someone's company without needing anything in return. We didn't become boyfriend and girlfriend. We were too old for those labels. But it became customary for us to have dinner together on Wednesdays. He brought fresh fish he bought at the pier. I made rice and salad. We ate watching the sunset, talking about books, old movies, how the world was when we were young. One night, after dinner, while we were washing dishes together, he told me, "Eleanor, you are the strongest woman I have known. I am not strong, I only survived. That is what it means to be strong, surviving when the world tells you to give up." I didn't know how to respond. I just kept washing dishes with a lump in my throat. 8 months passed since Mason and his family left. 8 months of absolute silence, without calls, without messages, nothing. Until one Tuesday afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it, and there he was. My son, thinner, with more gray hair, with deep circles under his eyes, came alone, without Victoria, without suitcases. Just him and an expression I hadn't seen in years. Humility. "Hi, Mom." Mason. We stood like that, separated by the threshold of the door, by months of silence, by years of wounds. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered looking at everything as if it were the first time. He touched the freshly painted walls. He saw the photos I had rehung. He stood frozen in front of a particular one. Him, at 10 years old, hugging me, both smiling in front of Disney World on a trip we made with the little we had. "I had forgotten about this," he said with a hoarse voice. I didn't. He turned to me with moist eyes. "Victoria and I divorced." I didn't say anything. I just waited. It was she who asked for the divorce. When she found out I had put a lien on the condo to pay you, when she saw our accounts were empty, when she understood the life of luxury was over, he laughed without humor. She left me in 2 weeks. She left with an entrepreneur she met on Instagram. Someone with more money, more connections, more future? I'm sorry. Don't be. I deserved it. He sat on the armchair without asking permission, letting himself fall as if he carried the world. "I lost everything, Mom. The bank took the condo. My job fired me because I couldn't concentrate. Friends disappeared when I stopped being able to pay expensive bills at restaurants. And you came here because you need something?" He looked up surprised. "No, I came because I needed to see you. To tell you that you were right about everything. That I built my life on lies, and when the lies fell, nothing was left." I sat in front of him. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. Get a job. Start from scratch. Learn to live with less." He looked me straight in the eye. "Learn to live like you lived. With dignity, even if there is no money." Those words reached me deeper than any apology. "Mom," his voice broke, "I didn't come to ask you to forgive me again. I came to ask you if someday, when I have proven I changed, when I have rebuilt my life with honesty, if we could try to be mother and son again." The tears I had held back for months finally came out. "We don't have to wait for someday, Mason. But I need you to understand something. I am no longer going to be the mother who sacrifices herself until she disappears. I am no longer going to allow anyone, not even you, to treat me like less than I am worth. I don't want that. I want to know the mother who stood up, the mother who fought, that strong woman I helped bury with my selfishness." We hugged there, in the middle of my living room, crying like we hadn't cried ever. It wasn't a hug that erased everything. It was a hug that recognized the damage, accepted the scars, but chose to try to heal anyway. That night, Mason had dinner with me. Refried beans, rice, hot tortillas, the food of our poverty, which now tasted different. It tasted like true home. "You know what I missed?" he said, wiping his mouth. "This, your simple food. For years I ate in expensive restaurants, and nothing tasted like this to me." "Why this?" I said. "It is made with love, not obligation, not resentment, with free love." He stayed to sleep that night, in the utility room, ironically. "It is fair," he said when I offered him one of the bedrooms, "that I feel what you felt." I didn't argue. The next morning we had breakfast together watching the sunrise. I introduced him to Robert, who stopped by to bring me oranges from his tree. They talked about architecture, construction, projects. When Robert left, Mason looked at me with curiosity. "Izzy, he is my friend. Maybe something more. I don't know yet, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that he makes me feel at peace. I am glad, Mom, truly." Mason stayed 3 days. He helped repair a piece of fence that was broken. He painted the garden wall. He pruned the trees. He worked with his hands, something he hadn't done since he was young. The day he left, hugging at the door, he told me, "I am going to get a job in Atlanta, something honest, even if it is starting from the bottom. And when I have enough to pay my own rent, when I can support myself without anyone's help, I will come visit you again. But this time, as a son you can be proud of." "I was always proud of you," I said. "But you were right. I was proud of the son I thought I had raised. Now I want to know the man you really are." He left, and this time his departure didn't hurt, because it wasn't abandonment, it was growth. The following months were the most peaceful of my life. Robert and I became closer. We didn't talk about marriage, formal commitments, we simply enjoyed the company. Walks on the beach, quiet dinners, deep conversations about life, death, the meaning of everything. Mason called every week. He told me about his new job as a supervisor at a construction company. He didn't earn much, but it was honest. He lived in a small apartment. He shared with a roommate. He cooked his own food. He washed his clothes. I am learning to live, Mom, he told me once. For the first time in my life, I am really living. 1 year after the day I recovered my house, I organized a small gathering. I invited my group of neighbors, Mrs. Patterson, who had been my salvation, Mr. Timus's provided, Stevens and Robert, Marina, who now worked selling crafts on the boardwalk. I prepared food for everyone. Lots of food. Sandwiches, potato salad, lemonade, iced tea. The house was full of voices, laughter, stories. In the middle of the celebration, Mrs. Patterson stood up and raised her glass of lemonade. I want to propose a toast to Eleanor, who taught us that it is never too late to defend oneself, that dignity has no price, and that women the world tries to bury always find a way to bloom. Everyone toasted, and I, with tears in my eyes, understood something fundamental. My worth was never in what I could give, in how much I could sacrifice, in how invisible I could make myself so others would shine. My worth was in simply existing, in occupying space, in breathing this salty air, in waking up every morning with the sun painting my room gold. That night, when everyone left and the house returned to silence, I went out to the deck with a cup of hot chocolate. The same chocolate Arthur prepared for me on Sundays when we were young and poor and happy. And there, among my things in an old box I hadn't checked in years, I found a letter. A letter from Arthur he wrote shortly before dying, and that I never knew existed. It was sealed, yellowed by time, with my name written in his crooked handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Eleanor, my warrior, if you are reading this, it means I left before you. And although it hurts me to think of leaving you alone, I also know you are the strongest woman I have known. Don't let the world extinguish you. Don't let anyone, not even our son, make you believe you aren't worthy. Because you are worth everything, my love. You are worth every sunrise, every star, every wave of the ocean you dreamed so much of knowing. And if one day you feel lost, remember this. True wealth is not in what you possess, but in what you do not allow them to take from you. Your dignity, your voice, your right to occupy space in this world. Be happy, Eleanor. Not when everything is perfect. Be happy now, with what you have, with who you are. I will love you always, Arthur. I cried there, under the stars, with the letter pressed against my chest. I cried for the lost time, for the battles fought, for the love that is never forgotten even if the person is gone. But I also smiled, because finally I understood the message. It didn't matter how much I had suffered. It didn't matter how much they had stolen from me. It didn't matter how many times I fell. What mattered was this. I was still here, standing, in my house, with my ocean, with my life rebuilt piece by piece. And that was the most valuable thing no one could ever take from me. If this story touched something in your heart, if it made you think about your own battles, about your own dignity, let me know in the comments. Tell me, where are you watching us from? What part of this story resonated most with you? And remember, it is never too late to defend what is yours. It is never too late to stand up. It is never too late to remind the world that you also deserve respect. Like if you believe mothers also have the right to be happy. Subscribe for more stories of women who refuse to stay silent. Because here, the Eleanors of the world have a voice. And as the love of my life said in that letter I found 20 years later, true wealth is not in what you possess, but in what you do not allow them to take from you. Until the next story, may it be with dignity, with strength, and with the ocean always on your side. The end.